Welcome to the Weather Farm. In this video, we are going to break down the storm systems, temperatures, and overall weather patterns for the continental United States over the next several days. We are going to examine the severe weather elements that lead to a high risk of severe weather Friday into Saturday, and then we'll dive in region by region. So let's get right to our forecast. As we begin our Friday, we are seeing a very strong low pressure system that is centered over Minnesota. That's a 982 millibar low, and look at these tight pressure lines. Those are going to indicate some strong winds, and those winds are coming out of the north. So we are pulling down some very cool air for this time of the year across parts of Saskatchewan, Manitoba, down into the Dakotas. Across the Dakotas, highs may struggle to get to the freezing mark for your day on Friday. We're watching some leftover showers. This was associated with a front that moved through the Ohio Valley Thursday night. We're seeing some scattered showers across Kentucky and Tennessee. And out in the Pacific Northwest, we're seeing a mix of rain and snow making its way into British Columbia and Washington State. And for our Friday, we are keeping our eye out for the threat of severe weather. The Storm Prediction Center has gone ahead and upgraded to a moderate risk portions of southeastern Missouri, western Kentucky, southern Illinois, and southern Indiana. So this includes places like Carbondale, Cape Girardeau, St. Louis, Paducah, over including the Louisville area. This is where we expect the greatest chance of tornadoes, severe storms, hail, and strong winds to occur. But just outside of that area, we see an enhanced risk stretching from Indianapolis towards Columbus, over toward West Virginia, down through Tennessee, including the Nashville area. You are also under the gun for severe weather on our Friday. So let's put our map into motion for our Friday. So we're going to go into the afternoon, and we're going to see basically that low pressure continue to spin over Minnesota, not making a lot of movement there. But by the evening, by the time we get to about 5 o'clock, we're starting to see a line of storms here through Illinois, down towards Arkansas. This is going to be our focus as we get into Friday evening for severe weather. We go to 8 o'clock, we see strong storms in Indiana and a line beginning to form down toward Memphis. By the time we get to 10 o'clock on Friday night, it's now impacting the Columbus, Ohio area, down toward Lexington, and making its way into Nashville. But by Saturday morning, those storms are dissipated and making their way off to the East Coast. That low continues to move off into Ontario, while we see more scattered precipitation making its way into the Pacific Northwest. Saturday, we are going to watch the threat of severe weather develop across the eastern seaboard, as well as we're going to watch areas down here for Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Texas. Dallas, you're definitely in the mix for some severe weather for our Saturday. So let's take a look at how that's going to develop. So we're going to watch as we go into Saturday afternoon. We're not really seeing much along the eastern seaboard, but we could get a few storms here popping across parts of Texas, especially as we get toward evening. We're going to watch those storms really start to develop. And then they're going to lose the daytime heating, so they're going to fizzle out by the time we get to Sunday morning. But we're seeing heavy amounts of snow and precipitation across Idaho into western Montana. That low pressure that's brought the severe weather to the Ohio Valley for our Friday, it continues to sit and spin over far western parts of Quebec, and it's bringing rain to Maine. A little bit of snow just north of the UP of Michigan for our Sunday morning. By the time we get to Sunday, we're going to watch for severe weather across Kansas and Oklahoma, and really it's going to be a multi-day event as we go into Monday and into Tuesday. We're watching severe weather generally in this four-state quadrant of Kansas, Missouri, Arkansas, and Oklahoma. So we're going to continue to watch to see how the models develop, because it is kind of rare to go ahead and issue this 15% watch box for severe weather this far out. So let's go ahead and take a look at our supercell composite. Again, this gives us an indication of where we might see severe weather developing. Doesn't indicate a likelihood or a guarantee, but this again tells us where we might see it. And so as we go through the day on Friday, we're really starting to see those yellows and oranges, even some reds starting to pop. So that's why, again, the Storm Prediction Center has gone ahead and highlighted this particular area of southern Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky for the greatest chance of severe weather. But as we go through the weekend, as we mentioned on Sunday, we're going to have to watch areas of Oklahoma and Kansas for an additional round of severe weather Saturday night into Sunday, and then we refire everything again going Sunday night into Monday. So a lot to be determined over the next 48 hours, but I want to dive right into what's going to happen here in the Ohio Valley. Now, this is the CAPE value. So this is the measure of the instability in the atmosphere at the given time tomorrow night. So we're going to start this at Friday morning. We're going to watch this go through the day and watch how these reds and these purples and oranges really start to explode over Arkansas. So the thinking is that there's going to be enough of a cap, or we're not going to have quite all the dynamics in place for that tornadic development, but the sounding would indicate the possibility of that. So as we move throughout the day, now we're getting to about 4 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and look at these extremely high values. So as we continue through the day on Friday, we're just going to watch those extremely high CAPE values across southern Indiana, western Kentucky, southern Illinois, making their way down towards Arkansas. You can clearly see where this cold front is, that drier air pushing in, fueling these storms out ahead of the system. So we can take a look at the radar here. And in the morning, as I mentioned, we're going to see some scattered storms that have made their way and dive to the south and east overnight Thursday into Friday morning. Those are going to fizzle out throughout the day, but it's going to be in the afternoon. We're going to start watching across parts of Missouri and Arkansas for further storm development. And by the time we get to about 3, 4 in the afternoon, we're seeing storms forming across parts of Illinois, down through southern Illinois, down into southeastern Missouri. And the thing I want to zoom in here is as we get to these storms in Indiana, they look to be congealing into a line of storms. Now, we could see individual discrete cells here within this, but there's a general line of the storms. So we could get some tornadoes to spin up where we start to see this bowing of the line a little bit, but it's down here across the far southern part where we see these individual discrete supercells. This is why we're going to watch this particular area, because these have the ability to quickly spin up tornadoes to produce heavy amounts of rain, strong winds, and damaging hail, because these are remaining discrete. So let's just kind of take these through a little bit more. We still see that line of storms through Indiana with maybe individual discrete cells, but still across the south, we see a little more congealing of the cells, but not like what we see across Indiana. As we get toward midnight, 8, 9 o'clock at night, we're still seeing discrete cells across western Kentucky. And by the time we get to about 10, 11 o'clock at night, those two are now forming into a line. That line that was racing through Illinois about 4 or 5 p.m. is now pushing way off into eastern Ohio. So these storms are going to move very quickly, especially in that line of storms. But it's those individual discrete cells that we are going to have to watch. As we take a look at our temperatures across the nation for our Friday, as I mentioned, we're going to have strong winds with that low pressure across parts of Minnesota. That's dragging down cooler air. Again, parts of North Dakota, you could struggle to get to freezing or the mid-30s for your Friday. That carries down 40s into South Dakota. But out ahead of that system, we're seeing temperatures surge into the 80s across most of the Ohio and Tennessee Valley, 90s along the southern states, and still triple-digit heat. It rules the day down in Texas. Out in the desert Southwest, you were starting to warm up with temperatures in the low 90s. As we go through the day Saturday, we're going to start to see that cooler air filtering down across the Great Lakes into the Ohio Valley. Temperatures about 15 degrees cooler than your Friday for most of this area. We are starting to rebound a little bit across the Dakotas, but it is still warm across the southern states, and that's going to carry into our Sunday. We start to see that warmth building across the plains. This is going to help fuel those storms across parts of Kansas and Oklahoma with that warm air and high dew points. Monday, we see the same area, and this again is why we don't think that those storms are going to move very much, and we're going to watch Kansas, Missouri, Arkansas, and Oklahoma for the best chance of storms. So now we're going to jump, and we are going to take a look region by region, and we are going to start in the Northeast for your temperatures. So on our Friday, it is 60s and 70s across most of this area, 80s across parts of Ohio, down toward Virginia. For your Saturday to begin your weekend, we're cooling down across the Great Lakes into New York, highs in the 50s and 60s, highs in the 50s across parts of Maine, but along the coast, enjoy that warmth for one more day because it's a great day to get out and about. Temperatures in the low 80s to mid 80s by the time you get down to places like Richmond and Virginia Beach. By the time you get to Sunday, we're still holding on to that warmth across parts of Virginia, but the northern part of New England, you've cooled down into the 40s. Great Lakes, Michigan, you're in the 40s. We are starting to see a rebound in temperatures across parts of Ohio into the 60s and 70s. That is short-lived as we begin to get under the influence of that next upper level low that is making its way across the central plains. The increased cloudiness and northwesterly winds are going to hold your temperatures down into the mid-50s for most of Ohio, Michigan, stretching back to Indiana, Pennsylvania, and into the Northeast. Parts of Maine, you could struggle to get to 40 degrees for your Monday. Same thing on your Tuesday. And really, that upper level low is really going to have an impact on our temperatures. We could see some record minimum high temperatures being broken across this area for our Tuesday. Still could change, almost a week away, but we will bring you the latest. Now let's dive down into the southeast. It's going to be pretty much the same story Friday through the weekend into early next week. Warm temperatures, 80s and 90s across most of this area. As we go into our Saturday, temperatures don't really change a lot. Going into Sunday, maybe a little bit cooler here across the Carolinas, 70s and 80s compared to those 90s you were seeing on Friday and Saturday. But by the time we get back to Monday, we're returning to those southerly winds, warming right back up into the 80s and 90s for the Carolinas. And as we get to our Tuesday, we're going to start to see cooler weather making its way into Arkansas, across Tennessee. That's going to have a brief impact across the northern tier of the southern states as we get to the middle of next week, as that upper level low continues to move across the United States. Looking at Texas and the south central plains, it's warm temperatures, triple digit heat. That's been the rule of the day for most of this week. That's going to continue through our weekend as well. Temperatures on our Saturday near triple digits across most of Texas. Louisiana and Arkansas, you're in the 90s. Out across parts of New Mexico and those higher elevations in those northern parts, we're going to be cut down into the 60s and 70s for your Saturday. And a little bit cooler weather continues to move into that area. 50s for your Sunday, where we have upper 40s in those higher elevations of southeastern Colorado. But that warmth, those 80s and 90s are surging up toward Kansas. Again, this is going to help fuel those thunderstorms Sunday night into our Monday. And looking at our temperatures on our Monday, it is almost a carbon copy of Sunday. It is not until we get to Tuesday where we have that upper level low across parts of Nebraska that's going to start to bring temperatures down into the low 50s for most of Kansas, 50s and 60s across Missouri. But as we get down to Oklahoma, it's only in the 60s for your afternoon highs. 70s returning to the Dallas-Fort Worth area, out toward Lubbock, into the panhandle of Texas. Even parts of southeastern New Mexico, you're going to be held down in the 70s for your afternoon highs. But still, across the most southern parts of Texas, you're still experiencing those triple digit. Going into the Ohio Valley and the Great Lakes region for our Friday, with that low pressure system centered over Minnesota, that's going to help keep temperatures down in the 40s and 50s there. But out ahead of those storms, it's 80s across the Ohio Valley. By the time we get to Saturday, that cooler air is making its way in. We could see temperatures only in the 40s in northern Michigan, northern Wisconsin, for most of Minnesota. Where you were in the 80s across parts of Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio, you've dropped to the 60s for your Saturday. Warming back, though, to the 70s to round out your weekend. And as we begin the new work week, that upper level lows and that northwesterly flow is going to really keep our temperatures down. This model may be overdoing it just a little bit. I don't think we're going to see temperatures this cool for afternoon highs, but this is something we're going to have to watch to see the extent of the cloud cover across the Ohio Valley and Great Lakes and its impact on the temperature. The sun angle this time of the year really can bust through a lot of those low-level clouds, and so the models, especially the American model, tends to overplay the cloud cover and its impact on temperatures. Across the northern plains, as we've talked about, that low pressure system keeping temperatures cool for our Friday, rebounding slightly on our Saturday into the 50s and 60s, and then continuing to maintain that temperature, 50s and 60s generally for most of the area for our Sunday. As we begin a new work week, we see that upper level low. That's going to be associated with a system that's moving into the Pacific Northwest Saturday into Sunday, but it's going to make its way into parts of the Dakotas and Nebraska, and it's going to keep temperatures down in the 30s and 40s. We could even see some snow showers with this system. The desert Southwest, you're warm for your Friday. 90s are going to be generally the rule in the desert Southwest. 50s and 60s across parts of Utah and Nevada. As we make our way to start our weekend, slight cool down across this part of the area. 40s and 50s are going to be prevalent. As we go into our Sunday, much of the same. Warm in the desert, not as warm as we saw on our Friday, maybe mid 80s to near 90 for most places, but that quickly rebounds, and we see temperatures rebounding in the low 90s as we start to warm across parts of Nevada. And as we get towards Tuesday, the heat turns on again. We could see triple digit heat across the desert Southwest. We could see upper 80s for Los Angeles, and we could see 70s across most of Nevada. Looking at the Pacific Northwest for our Friday, 40s and 50s are going to be common across this area. As we make our way into our Saturday, much of the same. We're going to have unsettled weather that's really going to help keep those temperatures down for our Saturday into our Sunday. And Sunday could be one of the cooler days where we could see highs across parts of Idaho, especially in those higher elevations in the Bitterroots. We could see that in the 30s and 40s. but we're going to start to rebound by the time we get to Monday and into Tuesday. Warm temperatures, 50s, 60s, even some 70s across parts of southern Oregon. When we look at our temperature outlook, we are looking at that period as we look towards that ever important Memorial Day weekend. Temperatures are going to be below normal for most of the eastern half of the United States and above normal for the western part of the United States. And as we start that map here, this is our temperature anomaly map. So this shows the departure from the seasonal norm for your particular location at that particular time of the day, and the time's up here in the upper left-hand corner. So for this would say at 8 o'clock next Thursday evening, Indianapolis, you're projected to be 12 degrees below your seasonal norm. So as we go through the Memorial Day weekend, we see those blues and purples in the east indicating those below normal temperatures. We see those reds and oranges across the west coast indicating above normal temperatures for this time period. And as the Climate Prediction Center has said, as we make our way through the Memorial Day weekend into the last days of May, that's when we see those temperatures continuing to be below normal. But as we get towards the last couple of days of May, we're going to start to see a ridge building across the Central Plains, and there are signs that we could start June pretty warm across most of the United States. We'll have the latest on that in an upcoming video. And as we look at our Drought Monitor Index, this was the latest one that was issued on Thursday, May the 15th. We are seeing extreme, exceptional drought across parts of western Texas into southeastern Arizona and southwestern New Mexico. We're seeing extreme droughts across parts of northwestern Nebraska into Wyoming, even parts of North Dakota. Now, the rain you're going to get Thursday night, Friday into this weekend, that's going to help temper the drought just a little bit, but it's not enough to quench that drought. As we get towards Nevada and Las Vegas, we're seeing extreme drought. We're even starting to see areas that are abnormally dry near the Chicagoland area, through the Appalachian Mountains, down into Florida and along the coast. So this is something we're going to continue to watch. We've not had those big rainfall events that have traversed the United States like we typically see in our springtime. We've seen more severe weather than anything. So we're going to see how this continues to play out in future iterations of this Drought Monitor map. But I did want to bring you the latest with this map to end this video. Well, we thank you for joining us here at the Weather Farm. We hope you have a wonderful day. Stay safe. Have a way to get those local severe weather alerts if your area is impacted by severe weather this upcoming weekend. We'll see you again on Monday with a new video. Have a great weekend.